Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the video. In this review, we're checking out the Hamtun Kraken H2, or I guess it's the version 2 of this titanium dive watch. And I was excited to check this out. It was lent in by a close friend and subscriber. I just love a really nice white dial dive watch. And Hamtun also makes really good titanium watches in general. They're based out of the UK, and when their Kickstarter campaign started for this about the end of last year, these were only 199 euros, but the price has now increased to 300 euros on their website. But also, most of the colorways or options for this model have actually sold out, so you might have to check out the gray market if you're interested in this timepiece. So this is my first impressions of the micro brand, and I have to say I'm very impressed overall. Let's start off with the case dimensions first. You're looking at a 41 millimeter across the case diameter. Now if you flip to the side, I get 47 millimeters tip to tip here on the lugs. Case thickness comes in at 13.5 millimeters to a flat sapphire crystal, and this sapphire crystal has excellent anti-reflective application. And then the lug gap here for the matching titanium oyster style bracelet is 22 millimeters, bracelet tapering down to about 20 millimeters. So really nice dimensions, and I should also mention, because this watch is full titanium, both the head and the bracelet's titanium, sized up for my 7.5-inch wrist, or about 19 centimeters in circumference, this thing weighs in at about 130 grams. So it gives you a lot of comfort on wrist as well, especially for a sports or a dive watch with this type of heft and legibility. Now let's move in and take a look at the dial, because it's extremely clean. I like that all of the applied indices have black surrounds just for added legibility, and the handset also has the same black bordering for those Roman sword style hands. I really like that pop of color on the lollipop tip near the seconds hand. And you can see you get a bit of dimension too, because there's that outer chaptering or rehaut that just gives you a little more dimension to go along with the appliques on the dial. In addition to that, you have a really nice offset date aperture at the 4 o'clock, and I do love how they step down that date disc as well. And then you get very crisp writing on the date wheel in black text, just to go with the contrast of that really nice matte white dial. Now if we move away from the dial, you can see you have a really nice matte black bezel ring. This is a loomed ceramic bezel, so black ceramic, and then you have really nice etched in white contrasting numerals, and then you have the triangle at the 12 o'clock there. Now legibility on this guy is really good considering it's a white dial diver. All of the indices, the handset, and as I mentioned, the ceramic insert here is loomed with BGW9 Superluminova. And I'll throw up a loom shot in a second, because I really do think they did an excellent job. It's very legible in light conditions. And if you look at the loom, it almost appears that the lollipop tip for the seconds hand, it might actually have a different shade of blue, or it just might be green. They might just use like an X1 Superluminova formulation just on the second hand. And that's just kind of a nice distinguishing feature for this watch overall. Now there's some very shallow knarling along the bezel, and the bezel itself is a 120 click unidirectional. And the clicks are quite satisfying, although it doesn't sound the same as a stainless steel bezel. I think it's just because it's titanium on titanium. It is a little hard to turn just because of a shallow knarling, but once it's locked in, there's no backplay there whatsoever. Now you can see close to 6 o'clock, the Crakin is printed as well as automatic 200 meters. So this is a true 200 meter diver. You do have a screw down crown that's offset near the 4 o'clock position. And for this particular model, it's running the Seiko Instruments NH35 movement, which has about a 42-hour power reserve, 24 joules. You can manually wind, you can unscrew it all the way, and then you can actually hack the movement so you can set to a reference time. And I will mention, with this crown fully popped out, there's minimal wobble there whatsoever, which is the hallmarks of a well-designed crown. and then popping it back in. Rethreading it is very easy to do. The grip for the crown, which is quite large, is very easy to maneuver. Flipping to the side, you can see that the Hamtun logo is deeply etched into the crown, and you do have this basically purely satin finish on the titanium on the watch. And then you do have, it looks like some brushing on the tops of the lugs and as well as the bracelet. Note that this watch does have the lugs that do turn down quite nicely. They do have drilled lug apertures, so if you want to swap this out for like a leather strap or rubber bracelet, it shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. Speaking of which, one of the stretch goals was to actually supply a silicone bracelet here, but this one you have to cut to length, and I'm not going to do it for the review because this isn't my watch yet. So it's just going to stay on the bracelet for the entirety of this video. So construction of the bracelet is pretty solid itself. Do note that the end links are solid, but you kind of have this male protrusion here. So that does extend the actual lug to lug here just a little bit closer to 50, but it's still extremely comfortable because it's lightweight. Again, this bracelet does taper down to about 20 mils at the clasp. You do have screw pins here that fix the individual links, so sizing this shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. And then you have the Hamtun clasp, which just has their etched in logo here, and it's just your simple fold over with twin trigger deployment here. And this part isn't really milled out whatsoever, it's just pressed titanium, although at this price point and with the materials they use, that's kind of more common. It is very secure, and you get 3 micro adjustment holes here. So I will say one minor letdown is the clasp in general. I mean, it's nice and thin. I have no problems with it once it's secured, but they could have added more micro adjustments, and it would have been nice if they could mill this part out a little. Now looking at the case back, you can see right dead center they have a picture of what I assume is a Kraken sea monster. And then you do have the Hamtun watch's logo at the top, and the case back itself is screwed down, aiding in that full 200 meters of water resistance. So here's a quick wrist shot of the Crakin H2 on my 7.5 inch wrist, and as you can see, it wears very comfortably. If you're not used to titanium, it definitely does differ compared to stainless steel for a diver with wrist presence. And also the feeling of it is slightly different against your skin. It tends to stay a little bit cooler, especially now during the summer. That's kind of a nice feature. It doesn't like fluctuate in temperature as much. And for anyone who has a nickel allergy with stainless steel, because this material is pure titanium, you're not going to have any skin reaction that way either. Okay, so before I close out the video, are there any negative aspects of this watch that you should be aware of? I'm really nitpicking here. I would have liked to see on the bezel a little bit more engraved knurling along the side of the bezel. The bezel itself isn't very thick, and it is a little hard to turn. And the only other nitpick I'm going to say is the clasp itself. You know, they could have done a little more detail work. They could have added a little more micro adjustment here. And they could have also made it a little bit longer or added a dive extension. But aside from those minor nitpicks, overall, I'm very impressed with this micro brand. The Crakin 2 really is its namesake. It's a Crakin watch. And if you can pick one up on the used market for under 500 Canadian, I'd say definitely do it. What you're getting is really clean legibility on a nice white diver. I mean, the lume on this watch is insane. The attention to detail on the dial should be really commended. I love that touch of blue that they used on the seconds hand. I love the nicely framed and stepped down date aperture that's offset near the 4 o'clock. And I also like that the oversized crown is offset to the 4 o'clock position too, so it doesn't dig into your wrist. But guys, I'd love to know what your experience is with the micro brand Hamtun. Have you had one of their watches before, and would you consider picking up one of the Crakin H2s? I'd love to see your feedback in the comment section, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video.